The rain pelted the single-paned windows of Maya's studio apartment, a relentless drumming that matched the pounding in her chest. Each drop seemed to mock the leaks in the ceiling she couldn't afford to fix, the water collecting in a chipped bowl on the floor. She sat cross-legged on a rug, so worn it barely qualified as fabric, surrounded by a fortress of unopened bills. The flickering light of a single bulb cast jagged shadows across the envelopes, their contents a litany of numbers that haunted her. $42,000 in student loans, $8,000 in credit card debt, $3,200 for a medical bill from an emergency appendectomy last year. Her bank account, checked obsessively on her cracked phone screen, showed $87.43. The math was cruel, unyielding, a betrayal of every plan she'd ever made. Maya's hands shook as she held the latest notice, the words, "Final warning," screaming in red ink. Her breath hitched, the familiar knot of panic tightening in her chest, a weight that had settled there 6 months ago when her marketing firm collapsed overnight. The severance check had been a cruel joke, barely covering a month's rent in the city where dreams came to die. Freelance gigs were like chasing ghosts, endless applications, sporadic responses, and checks so small they felt like insults. She'd sold her car for $1,200, enough to keep the lights on for a few months. Her laptop wheezed with every click, and her fridge held half a loaf of bread, a jar of questionable pickles, and a stick of butter. She rationed like gold, the weight of it all pressed down, heavier than the storm outside, threatening to crush her. Once, Maya had been the girl with plans, big, glittering ones, that sparkled like the city skyline she used to stare at from her college dorm. She'd graduated with honors, her head buzzing with visions of a career in advertising, a loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, and trips to places where the air smelled of adventure, Morocco maybe, or Bali. She'd imagined sipping coffee in bustling markets, her life a tapestry of experiences funded by her own success. But at 29, those dreams felt like someone else's story. Now she was just trying to survive, each day a battle against the numbers that defined her. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the haze of despair. It was Lena, her older sister, whose voice could still coax a smile from Maya, even on the worst days. "You okay?" Lena asked, her tone warm but laced with worry. Maya wanted to lie, to say she was fine, but the words stuck in her throat like dry bread. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know how to keep going." Her voice cracked, and the silence on the other end felt like a hug she couldn't feel. Lena didn't offer empty promises or quick fixes. She listened, letting Maya's fears spill out, then said, "You're tougher than this, Maya. You've got to fight for yourself. You've done it before." The words lingered long after the call ended, a tiny spark in the darkness. Maya thought of the summer she was 16, when their parents' divorce left them scrambling. She'd worked double shifts at a diner to help Lena cover rent, her hands smelling of grease and determination. If she could survive that, she could survive this. The spark grew, stubborn and fierce, whispering that she wasn't ready to give up. The next morning, Maya woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. The debt was a mountain, towering and merciless, but mountains could be climbed, one step, one foothold at a time. She brewed the last of her coffee grounds, the bitter aroma filling the air, and sat at her wobbly kitchen table with a notebook she'd found in a drawer. Step 1. Face the truth. She listed every debt, every interest rate, every minimum payment. The total, $53,200, stared back at her, a number so large it seemed to mock her existence. But writing it down made it real, not just a specter that haunted her dreams. She spent hours scouring the internet, her eyes burning from the glare of her dying laptop. Blogs, forums, And YouTube videos offered strategies: snowball method, avalanche method, side hustles, budgeting apps. The snowball method, paying off smallest debts first, felt tempting for the quick wins. But the math didn't lie. Her credit card's 22% interest rate was bleeding her dry. She chose the avalanche method, targeting the highest interest debt first because feelings couldn't outrun numbers. She downloaded a free budgeting app, inputting every expense: rent, 900, utilities, 120, groceries, 150 if she was careful. Coffee runs were gone, as were takeout, new clothes, and the streaming services she'd once binged to escape. Each cancellation stung, but it was a cut she could control. Finding work was the harder battle. Her resume, once a point of pride, felt like a relic from a life she no longer recognized. She sent it out anyway, applying to anything that paid: barista, data entry, dog walking, retail. Rejection emails flooded her inbox, each one a jab at her confidence, but she kept going, fueled by Lena's words and a refusal to let debt win. A temp agency finally called, offering a part-time gig sorting mail at a law firm for $15 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline. She walked to work to save the $2.50 bus fare, her sneakers soaking through in the rain, the cold seeping into her bones. At night, Maya turned to side hustles. She signed up for a freelance platform, writing product descriptions for $10 each. Tedious work that made her eyes cross, but added $50, $100, $200 to her account over weeks. She sold old clothes online, haggled at flea markets for extra cash, and tutored high school kids in English through a community center for $20 an hour. Every cent went to her credit card, the one with the balance that taunted her. The first time she paid more than the minimum, $200 instead of $50, she felt a rush, like she'd landed a punch in a fight she was supposed to lose. The balance dropped from $8,000 to $7,800. It was a small dent, but it was hers. She taped a sticky note to her fridge. "You are not your debt." It became her mantra, whispered on days when the numbers seemed too big, her energy too small. She learned to cook cheap meals, rice and beans with spices she'd scrounged from a food pantry, a recipe she tweaked until it tasted like comfort. She found free events in the city: art gallery openings, public lectures, concerts in the park. They weren't Bali, but they reminded her of the world beyond her apartment's peeling walls. Lena visited when she could, bringing homemade cookies and stories about her own life: a new job, a bad date, a funny coworker. It was a tether to normalcy, a reminder that Maya wasn't alone. The emotional toll was brutal. There were nights when she cried into her pillow, convinced she'd never escape. Shame gnawed at her. Why hadn't she been smarter, more careful? Why had she thought a marketing degree would guarantee success? She'd been naive, trusting that hard work would be enough. But slowly, she began to see the debt not as a failure, but as a challenge. She wasn't just paying off numbers. She was reclaiming her life. Therapy was too expensive, but journaling became her outlet, her pen scratching out fears and victories in messy, ink-stained pages. "I paid $300 today," she wrote one night. "I'm not free yet, but I'm fighting." A year into her climb, Maya got a break: a full-time job as a junior copywriter at a small ad agency. The pay was $45,000 a year, enough to cover rent and keep chipping away at her debt. She celebrated with a single cupcake from a bakery, the vanilla frosting a rare sweetness she savored slowly. The credit card was paid off 6 months later, the zero balance on her screen a victory that made her laugh until tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just the money, it was the proof she could fight and win. The student loans were a slower battle, a marathon to the credit card's sprint. She called her lender, negotiating a lower interest rate that shaved months off her repayment plan. She kept her budget tight, redirecting every raise, every tax refund, every freelance dollar to the principal. Her apartment still leaked, the bowl on the floor a constant, but she didn't mind as much. She was building something, a future where she didn't flinch at the sight of a bill. 3 years after that rainy night, Maya made her final student loan payment. The email read, "Balance $0." She exhaled, a weight lifting. When she called Lena, the shout on the other end made her laugh, free, proud, and finally unburdened. That night, she walked to the park near her apartment, the air crisp with the scent of wet grass and possibility. She sat on a bench, watching the city lights flicker like stars against the dusk. For the first time in years, she felt light, as if the weight of the debt had been a physical thing she'd carried on her shoulders. The relief wasn't just financial, it was the triumph of knowing she'd clawed her way out of a hole that had once seemed bottomless. Maya began saving, first a little, then more, with each raise. She opened a retirement account, once unimaginable, and took her first vacation in years, savoring the freedom she'd earned. She framed the sticky note that started it all, a symbol of the resilient woman she'd become. For Maya, financial security wasn't a number. It was sleeping peacefully and planning ahead without fear. She still lived simply, but now by choice, not need. The rain outside her window no longer felt heavy. It was music she could finally dance to. She wasn't the girl with big dreams anymore. She was the woman who made them real. Ready to take control of your financial future? Start your journey to freedom today. Create a budget, tackle one debt at a time, and discover the power of resilience.